proving that Isaiah 53 is not about Jesus, part 2. Isaiah 53 is end-day prophecy. It says in Isaiah 52 and verse 9 and 10 that burst out, sing glad song in unison, O ruins of Jerusalem, for Yahweh will have comforted his people. He will have redeemed Jerusalem. Yahweh has bared his holy arm before the eyes of all the nations. All the ends of the earth will see the salvation of our God. So this is in reference to the end of days when God reveals his holy arm before the eyes of all the nations for the salvation of Israel. And that's what's being talked about in Isaiah 53 verse 1. It's the kings of Gentile nations that are speaking in Isaiah 53 verse 1. And they're shocked and amazed about the exaltation of Israel, as what it says in Isaiah 52 and verse 13, that God's servant will succeed, the servant being Israel, Isaiah 41 and verse 8. And according to Isaiah 53 verse 1, it's the kings of Gentile nations saying, who would have believed what we have heard? For whom has the arm of Yahweh been revealed? And the arm of Yahweh was revealed for the salvation of Israel. So Israel is the subject matter of Isaiah 53 verse 1. And Isaiah 53 verse 5 is mistranslated because the servant does not suffer for anybody's sins. The servant suffers because of the inequities of the Gentile nations, because of the oppression of the Gentile nations. The servant, who is Israel, suffers. And remember that there are 7 different verses, starting in Isaiah 41 and verse 8, 7 different verses that explains Israel as God's servant. So the context is what's going on in Isaiah 52 and 53 is that it's talking about the end days. God reveals his holy arm for the salvation of Israel, and there's worldwide knowledge of God. All right, all the earth will see the salvation of Israel, and they're going to know that Yahweh is the one true God. There's going to be worldwide knowledge of God, like it's prophesied in Isaiah 11 and verse 9. And then God's servant will be exalted. Israel will be exalted. Isaiah 52 verse 13. And the kings of Gentile nations, it says in Isaiah 52 and verse 15, so will the many nations exclaim about him, and the kings will shut their mouths in amazement, for they will see that which had never been told to them, and will perceive things that they had never heard. Who could have believed what we have heard? For whom has the arm of the Lord been revealed? All right, so again, the kings of Gentile nations are speaking, and we're just going to pick it up where we left off from the verse video that I made. And it starts off in Isaiah 53 verse 7 that he was persecuted and afflicted, but he did not open his mouth. Like a sheep being led to the slaughter, or an ewe that is silent before her shears, he did not open his mouth. So if you read Psalms 44, there's 2 verses in Psalms 44 that explains that Israel are sheep for the slaughter. And there's 1 verse in Psalms 39 that explains what it means to be silent, that the servant was silent and did not open his mouth. So Israel doesn't open their mouth because, just like King David is talking about in Psalms 39, that he didn't open his mouth and he was mute because he understood that the punishment that he was receiving came from God, directly from God. And that's the context of what's going on in Isaiah 53 verse 7. Israel is silent before her shears during their persecution by the Gentile nations, because they understand that it was a punishment from God for their waywardness, because they were exiled from the land of the living, which is Israel. So that's what it's talking about in Isaiah 53 verse 8. Now that he has been released from captivity and judgment, who could have imagined such a generation? Again, the kings of Gentile nations are speaking. It's after the exaltation of Israel. And they're saying, now that Israel has been released from captivity and judgment, who could have imagined such a generation of people? For he had been removed from the land of the living. All right, they were exiled from the land of Israel. An affliction upon them, that was my people's sin. Okay, so it says in the Hebrew, negalamo, for Isaiah 53 verse 8, an affliction to them. All right, so it's mistranslated in Christian Bibles, and it says that he was afflicted, when actually lamo means they, them. Okay, Another verse in Isaiah 53 verse 9 is also in the plural, that he made his grave with the wicked and he was with the rich in his deaths, is how it says it in the Hebrew, plural, the deaths, executions, for committing no crime and with no deceit in his mouth. Okay, so Isaiah 53 verse 9 is the exact opposite of the Jesus myth. All right, Jesus did not make his grave with the wicked. He made his grave with the wealthy, the tomb of Joseph of Arimathea. And Jesus was not with the rich in his death. He was with the poor, wicked thieves on the cross. All right, so Isaiah 53 verse 9 is the exact opposite of the Jesus myth. And you might argue that it's about Jesus because it says, for he had committed no crime and there was no deceit in his mouth. But if you read Zephaniah 3 and 13, it explains that the remnant of Israel will commit no crime and there will be no deceit in their mouths. All right, a reference to Israel in the end of days, because Israel will all be made righteous in the end of days. Isaiah 60 and verse 21. Okay, so Yahweh desired to oppress him and he afflicted him. If his soul would acknowledge guilt, he would see his offspring and live long days. All right, and the desire of Yahweh would succeed in his hand. So Isaiah 53 verse 10 is mistranslated in Christian Bibles. They say that if he would make himself as an offering for sin, that he would see his offspring and live long days. That is a mistranslation. Again, the correct translation is that if he would acknowledge his guilt, he would see his offspring and live long days. If Israel would acknowledge their guilt, they're going to see their offsprings and they're going to live long days. So Jesus never had children, so he had no offspring, and he didn't live long days on the earth. So it can't possibly be about Jesus. So he would see the purpose and be satisfied with his soul's distress. With his knowledge, my servant will make the many righteous. Okay, so it's the knowledge of the servant that makes the many righteous. And the knowledge of the servant is the Tanakh, the Torah, the Nevi'im, the prophets, and the Ketuvim, the writings. So it's the Hebrew scriptures, the knowledge in the Hebrew scriptures, that they live by example as a light unto the nations, is what it says in Isaiah 49 in verse 6, and also Isaiah 42. There's a verse in there that explains that it's about the nation of Israel, and that Israel is a light unto the nations. And so this is how they're a light to the nations. Israel is a light to the nations because they obey the word of God, right? It's talking about the righteous remnant of Israel. And so it's their knowledge. It doesn't say that with his blood he made the many righteous. It says that with the servant's knowledge, okay? And the servant is Israel, and their knowledge is the Tanakh. Therefore, I will assign him a portion for the multitudes, and he will divide the mightiest spoils, in return for having poured out his soul for death and being counted among the wicked. For he bore the sin of the multitudes and prayed for the wicked. And prayed for the wicked. All right, so they prayed for the wicked. All right, so Isaiah 53 can't be about Jesus, especially if you believe Jesus is God, because why would God pray for the wicked? I mean, God doesn't pray to himself, and definitely it's talking about Israel in context, again, that they poured out their soul until death and were counted among the wicked, because they would not submit, just like the example that we get from history, that the Israelites would not submit to the will of the Gentile nations. They were devoted to the God of Israel until death, and they rebelled against the Roman Empire. And there's a lot of history about the Jewish people that were devoted to their faith, and because of their devotion to their faith, they were counted as wicked. They were persecuted and killed, unalived. And that's the history of the Jewish people. I mean, just look at what happened in Germany. Like, that was definitely the Jews being themselves, being a light unto the nations, living the example, obedient to the word of the God of Israel. And they were oppressed by, and they're still being oppressed today by, the Gentile nations. And it is prophesied that in the end days, God will intervene to save Israel in the end of days, and the world will be shocked that the Israelites were devoted to the one true God and to his law.